I suppose a statue is literally a symbol of what a culture values and deems important. The statue of Edward Colston, that's his name, isn't it, that was pulled down in Bristol, is an interesting symbolic moment. Obviously, removing a statue of a slave trader is an appropriate action at this time. And as an act of civil unrest or disobedience or direct action, it's pretty good, I think, because it's not hurting any individual, anybody. It's symbolically expressing a changing attitude, a changing time. It's a kind of a revolutionary act. Let's have a look at that moment, because it's interesting how the contagion of, in this time of pandemic, the contagion of new ideas, positive new ideas, is spreading through the information networks that we all now share.
As protesters at a Black Lives Matter march in the port city of Bristol toppled a statue of 17th century slave trader Edward Colston, then trundled it through the city's tarmac streets.
Give it a good trundling, trundle old Edward Colston down a city street. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I suppose at the time that Edward Colston was a slave trader, it was normal to trade slaves. I wonder what other symbols of power are now going to be queried.
And tossed it into the sea, the same harbour where his slave ships once docked.
It could only have happened that way. It could only have been ripped down. What is that doing up there? It would be like you having somebody that has abused your family all your life. You know who he is. And I get a statue and I put it in your front garden.
Well, yeah, you can't really argue with that, can you? I mean, you can't argue with it. What I think is fascinating is now, of course, there is a list of 78 statues and monuments that celebrate slavery and racism. Now, what fascinates me about this is the corollary and teleology of this idea. If an obvious example of oppression and exploitation like slavery has been correctly, in my opinion, identified as problematic and belonging to the past and something that should be overthrown, removed, then what about other emblems of power that are more subtle and insidious? Because for me, I would say that as time passes, I don't know if progress is the right word to use, there are incremental concessions granted. Allow women to vote, abolish slavery. But my intuition and part of my education suggests that power is masterful at brinkmanship, at yielding where necessary and continuing to maintain the interests of the powerful. If you remove statues of Confederate generals who are overtly racist, what about slave owners like Jefferson and Washington? If you remove slave traders like Edward Colston, what about more recent historical figures, including Churchill, who gets discussed in one of the videos that we're citing here, who is part of an imperial and colonial project? When do we acknowledge, as Kehinde Andrews, friend of the show, continues to point out, that our institutions in countries like this one and America and Australia are founded upon ideas that privilege certain sections of the population and condemn and exploit other sections? And ultimately, if you follow it, if you keep pulling at the threads of this tapestry, power itself is about oppression and control. In the end, you have to get rid of the monarchy, parliament, money in its present form. I'm not suggesting these are bad things. I've long suggested that revolution, necessary, important, inevitable. And if this current line is pursued, that's where it leads.
You know, if you want to remove statues, if you want to change your architecture, you do that democratically and sensibly.
All of our institutions and all of our architecture are built upon violence. It was violent to colonize India, violent to colonize the continent of Africa. These are violent acts, and that violence is ongoing. So the pulling down of a bloody statue is symbolically important, but compared to the degree of violence, that's historic violence and contemporary violence, it's small fry. This is lovely because it's a subtitle here. Germany has removed all statues of Hitler. That would be an interesting meaning. Do you think we should keep these statues of Hitler up? Well, I don't know. I mean, some people don't like him.
I think there's a line that we can draw here with regard to how people are remembered. I mean, we're looking today at protesters, for example, saying that we should tear down statues of Francis Drake or James II or Horatio Nelson. I don't think that that is entirely appropriate.
In a way, though, it is appropriate. In a way, that's the line that we're on. And my own opinion and feeling is, yeah, if you want revolution, if you want real change, then you have to sort of follow that line to where it leads. Where is the core of power? Where are the heart of these institutions? In a sense, in the end, it will come to economic and financial realities, not symbolic architectural emblems, important though it is to remove them, significant though it is to remove them. Really, where power is held is obviously the organisation of resources and the ability to make decisions that affect your own lives.
Would you want to get rid of Churchill's statue then, Kendi?
I think, look, Churchill did some good, certainly, but let's be honest, Churchill's also responsible for the deaths of millions of black and brown people. Churchill was a eugenicist. In fact, Churchill and Hitler probably would have agreed on many things when it comes to race.
Come on, Kendi. You see, this is the trouble, Kendi. When you say...
Look at the dude in the middle going, no, I'm not having that. With his AirPods in. I've lost my AirPods. I'll tell you what, it's killing me. I have to have ones with like little wires coming down. I feel so embarrassed. Little mouse tails. And that's so embarrassing. See, like what Kendi Andrews is saying is difficult to hear. Like, you know, I mean, like, I'm a white person. My grandparents, like, you know, I've got service people in my history and stuff, in my family history. But what he's saying is true. It's not a lie to say that Winston Churchill was responsible, etc., and that there will be many things that, you know, that Hitler and Churchill would have agreed upon. We're being asked to re-examine what our myths are, what our nations stand for, even what the word "our" means, who's included in "our." I would like "our" to include all of us, and for that to be true, there's going to need to be the removal of more than icons, but the ideas that these icons represent will have to be re-examined, re-evaluated, and in many cases removed in the same way the statues have been.
We've had this debate before, and this is where you don't just lose me, you lose the vast majority of the British public.
Who has the right to talk for the public? Who are the public? Which public? How do you break those things down? Whose interests are best served? The reason I think that the Black Lives Matter movement is interesting and exciting is obviously because of the important, explicit issues that are being dealt with. Furthermore, I am excited by what it evokes and what it might mean for equality more broadly. Inequality between sexes, genders, races, classes. This is where this leads, in my opinion. Already fascinating and extraordinary things are happening. But once you start to remove these emblems and symbols, obviously where it leads to is the point where you're addressing the very fabric of your society, the very privilege that surrounds many of us. You know, I've been thinking about I'm obviously a straight white person that got money. I might not have been born with it, but I've got it now. So I'm the person that benefits from this. And for me though, if you look inside yourself, whilst we all enjoy comfort, while we all enjoy objects, it's a sort of a natural thing, it seems, to enjoy comfort. It's a remarkable moment where people are striving for something bigger, more beautiful, more connected. And I hope that we individually and collectively can find within ourselves the resources to, in some cases, accept sacrifice, in some cases, accept change, in order that we may achieve something more beautiful together for all of us. What a fascinating, symbolic moment. Out of this pandemic, this time of stasis, is an emergent new awakening. None of us know where it leads yet, but certainly the questions that are being asked do lead to a vision that could present an entirely new way of living, by which I mean, and we're doing a video on Seattle also, collectivized communities run according to the democratic principles that that community put forward and vote for. In a sense, we're not looking for new ideas. We're looking for the ideas that are already here to be instantiated and realised. I don't think that can happen for as long as you have vast nations. I think breaking down nations into decentralised autonomous confederacies wherever possible and looking at where does power need to be centralised in order to serve people, I think that's the conversation that we need to be having. And it's fascinating and extraordinary that it's coming from this pandemic and increased awareness of police brutality.